Well, this is Brent Allan Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com. And this is a Common Lawyer Comments with Dan, I call him Montana Dan, the other elder at In Church. We're going to talk today about the jury. Montana Dan tipped me off what he's going to ask about. We're going to talk about it. The jury at common law. We like to talk about the two volumes of our common law tradition, the laws of nature, unwritten in the nature of creation, how things work, and the laws of nature's God, written in the Bible, as Blackstone says, revealed religion in writing. Those two, and a specific slice of that, a feature of our common law tradition that does not exist anywhere else in the world except in the few common law countries, is the 12-man jury.
Okay, we've talked about it quite a bit before, but I guess a lot of people, and maybe me in the past, have kind of thought it was kind of a waste of my time to be on the jury. But I've since come to, my mind has been changed of the importance of us being on a jury. Any thoughts there?
Oh, well, we say that a God, and go to the Bible, the English translation, a lot of them make a point of translating the Old Testament word Elohim and El with God. The word God. That's a habit we gained in our ancient Anglo-Saxon tradition. For historic reasons, you can go to the winterized translation of the Bible, and I have a long appendix there about that. But what an Elohim is, New Testament theos in the Greek tongue, it's an Elohim is a final decider, final arbiter, to be more precise, a final arbiter of right and wrong in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal. All of creation, and the Bible divides God's creation into two parts fundamentally, the skies and the land, heaven and earth. And over all creation, the final arbiter of right and wrong in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal is the creator, the maker of heaven and earth. But the creator of heaven and earth has delegated to Adam's race, down here on land, government. This is the day, the Bible calls this right now the day of man. In distinction to the day, the coming day of Yahovah. The Old Testament prophets called it the day of the Lord, the day of his government, the day of his final judgment. Well, right now, God has delegated that to mankind, and in our common law tradition, we do that. How do we do it? Well, the way God said, the process, not the outcome standard, but the way God said to do it, and that way is the 12-man jury. The 12-man jury down here on land, according to God, is the final arbiter of right and wrong in individual instances from whose decision there is no appeal. Our Constitution of the United States is a brief of common law government. I'm in good company when I say that. A lot of men have said that in the past. It is, clearly it is. And our Constitution of the United States guarantees in the federal courts, the courts of the general government, trial by jury. Trial by jury from whose decision there is no appeal. Well, unless the jury was not operated according to the course of our common law, but what the jury says is final. And when I say arbiter, not decider only, but arbiter, I mean the arbiter of right and wrong, the maker of heaven and earth, and right now, down here on land, of course, subject to the creator, but down here on land, arbiter means there is no obligation to give reasons for their decision. There is no obligation, no obliging, no owing. No juror owes anybody a reason for his decision, his verdict. Now, a juror can give the reason if he wants. I was in a jury trial once, and I wondered what took the jury so long, and I happened to see one of the jurors a month or two later down at Moonshine Store, south of where I'm from. And I asked, what took so long? Well, the juror didn't have to tell me, but the juror decided to tell me and told me the reason for their decision. But they don't have to. And God does not have to give you his reasons. He owes you nothing for what he does. But if you go to the Bible, you'll find out that sometimes he has decided to do that. But overall creation, God is the final arbiter of right and wrong. And God has commissioned the 12-man jury to be the final arbiter down here on land. You say, Brent, how do you know? Well, the Bible says so, number one. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 through 6, lay it out clearly. I've got extended explanation of that in the Common Lawyer's Bible, the Winterized version, the footnotes there. You can look at those. But also, I think it's abundantly apparent that the common law jury is just grabbing 12 men standing around and ask them what their verdict is. That's really fundamentally what a 12-man jury is. It's not the experts, it's not the lawyers, it's not the educated men, it's just 12 men standing around. And they get to decide in a murder case, for example, who lives and who dies. Well, the rest of the world says that's silly. In France, they think that's ludicrous. We should ask the experts to decide. Well, we've been doing it with the non-experts, just grabbing 12 men standing around for centuries. Who has more freedom? People in France, Europe, South America, where they don't have the jury? The communist countries, they're under the code of Justinian, the canon civil laws of Rome, the law of the city. Do they have juries? Have they experienced freedom? Nobody's experienced freedom like people in common law countries. Nobody. Why? That's because our final arbiter, God, little g, down here on land, as the Bible puts it, and says, and Jesus Christ references the phrase in the Psalms that says, ye are gods, little g, final deciders of right and wrong. It works pretty well. More freedom. Well, that's not unusual, if I'm not mistaken, said G.K. Chesterton of Australia. If I'm not mistaken, he said that's what our Savior did. He just grabbed 12 men standing around to deliver their verdict on the most important question ever posed to mankind, namely, who is Jesus the Christ? And Jesus the Christ made that point. It is recorded when he asked Peter, who do men say that I am? Well, the 12-man jury that he impaneled all came up with the same verdict, and they didn't budge. And they didn't have to give reasons, but some of them did. John was the only one that wasn't murdered for his verdict, and he lays forth his reasons in 5 writings. The Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and the final book of the Bible called Revelation. You can mine as a miner would mine precious metals. You can mine from those writings pretty easily the reasons for his verdict. Well, that's how important the jury is. We're doing it God's way when we use the 12-man jury. Why 12? Well, you got to ask yourself, why? I've read volumes on that question. People trying to come to an answer on that question. And it's lost. The reason is lost in the fog of antiquity, going back in our Germanic, Anglo-Saxon understanding, Scandinavian understanding of Christianity. That's our common law culture. That's where the common law comes from. Those people on the north of Europe going back. But The 12-man jury, you trace it back as far as you can to the Thang, the Althing, for example, of Iceland, places like that, and then it's lost in the fog of antiquity. But then it resurfaces in the Bible, in the gospel records, and then going on back, you see it on back through the Older Testament. And what it comes down to fundamentally is the first principle of gray-bearded men. That's what the Hebrew and Greek words elder mean, gray-bearded men serving as a plurality to make those final arbitration decisions, arbiters, from whose decision there is no appeal. Now, through our history, Dan, we've made ancestor worship out of those kind of men. Ancestor worship. In our mortality and weakness. That's what we must guard against, of course. Our ancestors are not to be worshiped. That's the great temptation of false doctrine of all mankind, by the way. But it is what God has ordained, and we are to guard against that and worship the maker of heaven and earth and follow his methods, his ways of doing things. We have a panel that makes those decisions. Sometimes it's a 3-man panel in our courts. Sometimes that comes up. Jesus Christ authorizes a 3-man panel, 2 or 3. He does that in Matthew 18. You see it throughout the Old Testament. When you add all of it together, it's always a plurality making that final decision, and most pronouncedly 12. Well, Dan, that's what I know about it for what it's worth. We're still doing it, but it's fading away. All the common law countries, except ours, have gotten rid of the grand jury. We're the only one that has it.
You said the gray-haired men, that you don't necessarily have to be old to be on a jury, right? But well, maybe in the eldership in other areas. Explain that more.
No, you don't. Well, you have to be 20 years old or above, according to the Bible, 21 at common law, and that's pretty much the way it is now. But see, by forces of evil doctrine, we were stupid enough as a people to follow the evil empire and give the vote and the power, the jury duty power, to 18-year-olds. The Bible doesn't authorize that, and the Christian community, because of the fervor and their lack of attention to the Bible, they didn't see what was happening, and they should have. I didn't see it either. Of course, I was pretty young when that happened. Matter of fact, I wasn't to the age of accountability, so I suppose I oughtn't to take responsibility for that problem. But I remember the older folk, the conservative crowd, taking to the streets and promoting lowering the voting age to 18. It shouldn't have been done. But neither should we have ever sent men under age 20 to war, but we've done it, and we shouldn't do it. Even our Militia Act of 1792 defines a militiaman that would be called out for service of the United States under the authority of the President of the United States, has been lowered to 17, I believe. 17. That was in 1792. That should have. See, the problem of being unbiblical is always with us, and we just struggle and guard against it. It's wrong. And God does not bless going afoul of his standards. He doesn't bless that. He blesses when we try to keep within his standards. He blesses that way of doing things. Back to you, Dan.
Okay, it doesn't seem like the jury or the legal system is operating quite like you're describing. Where have we gone off the track, or?
Well, we've gone off the track.
The principles are still there, but
yeah. Well, no, I agree. We go off the track. We're in constant danger of being derailed from our common law tradition. Constant danger. And the useful idiots of the evil empire never stop trying to move us away from it. And the jury is one of the things that the evil empire and the useful idiots thereof are forever seeking to weaken. We have, for example, right now, the juror's oath that has been changed in most places in America, requiring the juror to swear to obey the instructions of the judge. Well, there's nothing in our common law tradition that requires that. And I've even had people tell me, well, if I take that oath, then I'm bound to do what the judge says. And I say, no, you've forgotten the doctrine of the Bible that says an unlawful oath is to be disregarded once you discover it's unlawful. An unlawful oath, it's not like you have the option, according to God, of disregarding an unlawful oath. What's an unlawful oath? An oath where you attach to a promise, promising to do an unlawful thing. For example, in the Bible, a bunch of Jews got together in the book of Acts and swore an oath in blood. That means they took a little blood. We used to do this when we were boys. Take a little blood and sign, prick your finger, and then put it on a piece of paper and sign your name with a straw or something. We thought, but we'd heard about such things. But they did that, a blood oath, to murder Paul the Apostle. And they swore by blood oath, that's a promise supported by oath, they swore to neither eat or drink until he was dead. You say, well, then they're bound to do it. No. At that point, you're bound to disregard that unlawful oath. Disregard it. And tell everybody else you've disregarded it. It's called, at common law, making a clean breast of the conspiracy. That's conspiracy. To commit a crime, that's against the law to do that. And the oath is unlawful. The reformers struggled with that and came up with a lot of writing about how to go about recognizing an unlawful oath, because at that time, a lot of girls were in nunneries where they were being abused by priests and other people, sexually and otherwise, and by other women, other nuns. And they had taken a blood oath to stay there the rest of their lives. And so had the monks taken such a blood oath, and of course the secret societies, and on it goes. And there's a long section in that magnificently written extra biblical doctrine called Westminster Confession, a section dealing with unlawful oaths. And the bottom line is, according to the Bible, there's no obligation. There's an obligation to not. God requires you to not honor an unlawful oath. So I tell jurors, you're justified in assuming the judge will instruct you correctly, and you can take such an oath under that expectation of believing the judge will instruct you correctly. But once you, in your heart of hearts, after getting in the jury room and listening to the evidence, and in your heart of hearts, you decide the judge is wrong, and my friend, as a juror, you're in the driver's seat. And if you're obligated to anybody, including the judge, to rule this way or that, if you're obligated to anybody but God himself, then that's not the common law jury. No, you're in the driver's seat. If we wanted the judge to run the case, we wouldn't need the jury, would we? No. But we put the jury in place. Why? Well, quoting Justice Anthony Scalia, the reason we have juries is because we don't trust judges to do the right thing. Isn't that it? I've defended people before the jury, and I have been defended before a 12-man jury. And I remember thinking to myself, when I was being put on the block, I thought, and I had other people talk to me about it, I sought other counsel. I said, wow, do I want the jury? Which would give me the best shake? And I remember one of my friends, a lawyer, said to me, you don't think, do you, that you'd be smart to entrust your liberty to this judge? And I thought to myself, yeah, that's a simple question. Of course I wouldn't. He obviously is off the rails. Why do we have juries? Because judges are experts and they get off the rails. They're trained in the law schools. Maybe they were trained wrong. Maybe they are of a religious persuasion that doesn't feel responsible to the maker of heaven and earth. There's a lot of those. Maybe they have a dual citizenship in another country. There's a lot of those on the bench too. No, no, no. As we say at common law, I don't put my life, liberty, property, or combination thereof upon a judge, a single mortal. No, no. I want to do it God's way. What's God's way? I throw myself, as we used to say in our common law tradition centuries ago, I throw myself upon my country. I throw myself and my future upon my country. And the country is our common law jury. No, they're not voted into office. They'd really rather not be there. They're taken at random. They're not a representative body. No, they're representative samples of a body. Representative samples of a body, namely your country, but they are not representatives like a legislator. No, no, no. Whole different deal. Representative samples. I used to be in the mining business, Dan, and we took representative samples of the ore. The representative samples were not representatives of the ore. No, they were to give us a cross section of what the ore was. And there are very precise ways to ensure a proper cross section. It's like polling. Polling companies take polls, and they're real good at it. They can get down to within 2 or 3% of a cross section of what, for example, America thinks about a specific question. That's a representative sample. That's what a jury is, a representative sample. It's not representatives of anybody. Their responsibility is not to anybody but God alone. Well, that's my take on it. And of course, you can read about it. We have a book on the jury, commonlawyer.com. You can find it. And also, we have a couple of courses on the jury, 12 weeks long.
Yeah, just to further dig in, you talked about you don't have to obey the oath you take with the judge, but you hear a story once in a while that they'll get booted out, or the judge will come after them, or any thoughts there?
Oh, and that's been part of the problem. And over the centuries, the attempt by the powers that be to intimidate jurors, to lock them in rooms without food and water until they come up with a verdict. All those things are part of what goes on among sinful mankind, but keep in mind, the jury is still there. And anyone who would just try to point blank get rid of it is not probably going to get away with it. And it's up to us to maintain that mindset so we can keep the jury we have so far. And as long as we keep the jury, said a student of legal history, more important and more learned than me, as long as we keep the jury, we'll keep our freedoms. And there has never been a country that has kept its jury and lost its freedoms ultimately. So yeah, judges will do that, but the resilient beauty of our common law tradition, and the jury is part of that, is that our common law tradition works even when it isn't done exactly right. That's the beauty of our common law tradition. It's not a tradition of precision. It's not a tradition of precision like the law of the city, which governs all the rest of the world. It's a tradition of what works. And I've even been where the jury is stacked. You can't counter everything that government does wrong and unlawfully in a criminal case, but the jury has been stacked and still come through with the truth. That happens because the jury is not a majority institution. It's all or nothing with the jury.
Yep. A circumstance that you're aware of in our area, don't take a plea with the government hastily.
No, don't do it at all. Almost, I'd say make a deal now. You can't trust them. And in that case that you're talking about, the jury had already not convicted him once. He'd gone to trial once. Was it twice? Twice. The jury would not convict. The jury was hung. Well, that means no conviction. And finally, over a period of 7 years, he was under indictment. He broke down because they were keeping him from his family and ruining his life, and he took what's called an Alford plea. And an Alford plea is silliness. It's senseless. People are offered it thinking that they'll be okay. And the government, of course, just wants to nail your hide to the wall. Don't kid yourself. Prosecutors aren't there to be nice. Prosecutors are there to enforce the law. They're looking for something bad, as all our law enforcement officers. They're looking for lawbreakers. Don't think you're going to talk them out of it. You're going to help yourself by opening your mouth to them. They're just looking for evidence of law breaking. That's what they're attuned to. That's their culture. It's a vicious culture. That's why they aren't on the jury, and that's why we don't allow them to be the final arbiter, because they're too tainted and they're too used to it. They're too hardened to the process. Jurors bring to the jury box all of themselves. They're not hardened to the process. They still have emotions about it. They still have emotions. They aren't hardened to the ugliness of it all, as our judges, as our police officers, as our prosecutors. No, sir. So don't try to be a lawyer when you go to the jury box. No, just you be you. And you bring with you your emotions and the idea that your sensibilities can be shocked by what government is doing or by what somebody committing a criminal act has done. You bring compassion. You bring anger. You bring sorrow. The experts over time become hardened to all that. Just like a soldier can become hardened to killing. Just like a surgeon can be hardened to what his client or his patient is going through and what the family is going through. He just gets focused on doing his job. That's why general practitioners with bedside manner are important in the practice of medicine, by the way. Lawyers, I've known them, they get hard. And judges, they get what the lawyers can call, I forget what, well, of course, here's what I was going to say. They bathe everything in cynic acid. They get cynical. That's what it is. They get cynical. Cynic acid. They don't believe anybody. They're just cynical about everything. That's the way judges get. It's a sad deal, and by the time a judge gets that way, he ought to think about retiring, and sometimes it can happen pretty quick, because remember, all judges and law enforcement officers see and think about is depressing. Nothing positive about it. Most of what they see is pretty ugly. So we depend not on them, we depend upon the jury, the 12-man jury. Oh, here's what they called it. Another name for what the hardening of judges is judge-itis. That's what we used to say, judge-itis. They just get too hard, and once you get that hard, you take away an element of your being that would help you make a right decision. They may be logical, Dan, but our common law is not fundamentally about logic. No, it takes in more than that. The civil law is about logic, eloquence, the equation, all that. No, that's not our common law tradition.
Yeah, in EMS and law, they call it dark humor or black humor. Or is that kind of the same thing?
Yes. Now, maybe you can enlighten me. I've not heard that term, but you being authorized to do those kind of things, you've been through training and done it for years. Enlighten me on what black humor is.
Well, in EMS, you see things that not everybody else sees, and you get a little calloused, or just to protect yourself, I guess.
And to keep your mind on your business, because if you get too You get emotional about things. Sometimes it throws you off your game and you can't concentrate on what you've got to get done trying to save people's lives. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
But we don't want that in the courtroom. We want folk in the courtroom that have all of their being receptive and not hardened and cynical.
So you need the senses more attuned as fresh people on a jury.
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
Yes, no question. That's what you need to make those decisions. See, a surgeon will come in and say, well, I can do this, I can do that, and he does it all day, every day, and he's just used to slicing people open and doing what he does. But then the family gets together and discusses it. They discuss things that he didn't know anything about. They discuss the impact on children, the age of the man, the age of his wife, the age of the children. How could it affect their careers? Do we have enough money? The hardship it might put people through emotionally, on and on and on, more things than you could talk about, variables. They're the ones that have to make the decision, do I want to go through with this or not? If the surgeon were given the task, he'd say, oh, let's just do it. Besides, I need the money. What do you mean you need the money? Well, I got 4 children in college and I need the money. That's what the joke is. See, that's a black humor joke. A surgeon told me that. They talk that way. I've heard lawyers in cases about car wrecks where people were just devastated, injured for life, talk about the case in the crassest of terms. They're just hard to it. Oh, they do their job. They get in there, argue the case, go for it as hard as they can. But when it comes down to it in court, there are other things to take in consideration.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you, Brent.
Well, this is Brent Allan Winters, along with the other elder in church, Dan, Montana Dan, I call him, and we're discussing the jury, the importance of it. I thank you for taking time to listen. You can go to commonlawyer.com and see other resources we have there. Plus, you can listen to us on the radio or on the internet platform 7 days a week, and you can see the links there that you can click. You know, Dan Radio is on internet now mostly, and so people can listen all over the world. So go there and do that. Join us for our class on comparative law, comparing our law of the land, our common law, with the law of the city, the civil law, comparing and contrasting. That's coming up on July the 10th. And join us for church on Sunday at commonlawyer.com and click on the links. You can see us and listen to us, but I can't see you. commonlawyer.com.